services to the property. Is that considered bonusing if you do it after the fact of sale?
I'm not sure I understood. Are you?
Yeah, if I have a piece of, say for instance, a municipality has a piece of property and they want to sell it, okay, but they realize it would, the purchaser says, okay, I'll buy it, but I have to have service to the land site. Is that considered bonusing? But it's not. It doesn't fall under manufacturing, industrial, commercial. Say, for instance, it's a home development.
Well, servicing is. I mean, I may not be the better person to answer this because servicing is a whole world of doing things. So I wonder if maybe I think Brandon is on this because that's not even. I'm not even sure that's a planning issue. Come to think of it, I'm going to turn this one over to Jason.
As an economic development under the granting. The bonusing, I thought, is that a bonus to an individual after that, or would it be something that would be stated for all if the purchase was done? Say, for instance, you had the property, and part of the stipulation was anyone can propose to buy it, but we'll service it, or they request service. I don't know.
I'll help out. It depends what the service level standard is. So it's normal for municipalities to provide servicing to the road. That's not uncommon. And so it's very common, many municipalities, they all run servicing out to their urban boundaries, even though there's no potential development. Development might not happen for years and years. Because that's a general inducement to have properties ready to be developed. You also have to remember that with servicing for growth, there's fees recovered from that from development charges. So developers pay specifically development charges to cover off the required servicing cost for increased growth. But if there was some type of special servicing, so if there was some example that would be untypical servicing that a municipality would provide, so what would be above their normal service level standard. So for example, let's say we agreed to pay for 5G hookup to a particular site to induce that, but we never provided 5G hookups to any other developments. That could be construed as a special thing at development. But if it's, typical servicing that would go into other subdivisions. Now, anything beyond the street though, because our service level standard isn't that, and Mr. Godby could provide more comment. But let's say we provided servicing into the subdivision, that would be bonusing because again, that's above our service level standard. We take it to the street and the developer would have to bring it from the street into the subdivision. So there can be, I can't remember the community that they were accused of bonusing because they were doing some incremental servicing to their standard. But it has to be above what you would normally provide other developments. We run, we run servicing all over the county, and it would be hard to say, well, one's, more bonus than another one.
But at the end of the day, the service that is provided, the developer has to pick up that cost after the fact. Is that not correct?
For inside the subdivision, they pay for it beforehand.
No. If you provide a service after the fact and you're doing something for them that they asked for, do you get compensated for doing it after the fact?
Well, this council I was going to say this council just had that situation where there was a few properties that we tried to put a fee through, but we had to waive on that just last council meeting, if you remember. But Brandon might add some additional context.
Thank you.
Brandon, go ahead.
Yeah, through the mayor, I was just going to add a little bit of the other side of it is that if a municipality wants to get more into land development to be more the developer, then some municipalities create a separate economic development corporation. Right. And then there's a little bit more flexibility to go there, like Calgary's done that, other municipalities have done that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Can I answer your question, Linda? Good.
No, it actually it doesn't, but I'll look into it further. I know developers. I'm just concerned that sometimes your hands are tied when you want development to come in. And if there's a perk you can offer, then all of a sudden you're deemed to be a bonusing. So I don't know about it all. Like, I don't know all the facts. So I'm going to research it a bit more.
Yeah,
So
I think
the crux is that if you're bringing servicing to the street, that's kind of a base standard for any municipality, which is really all we're doing in Norfolk County. If you're bringing any servicing within the development itself, in some municipalities, if that is their standard, that would not be considered bonusing. It would be a consistent, inducement. In Norfolk County, however, that has never occurred. So if you were to provide any infrastructure within the subdivision itself, that here would be considered bonusing. Am I on the right track, Jason?
Yeah, and I think, I think this is something council and Brandon and Z can look into, because, making sure that we're maximizing economic development and being what we call development ready, I think is key for Norfolk County. And, but it has to be part of a program. It can't be kind of a pixies and choosies. Oh, I like this developer, so therefore I'll do this for him, but not for this other developer. And as Brandon said, there's lots of communities that, for industrial land, they would, it was a program, Brandon can remind me the name of it, but I think it was called the Ontario Ready program. For example, where municipalities would take their industrial land, completely service everything internally, do all that, and then sell it, because that was how they wanted to, undertake that approach. But there is a general requirement when we collect DCs, development charges, in that Development Charge Act and in that background plan, there is an actual legal obligation, because we are taking money from, the developers will say they take money from them. The people who buy the house and actually pay for it say it's from their house purchase, but but the obligation is we're charging development charges in order to have the infrastructure in place to grow the community. And, so you have to take those development charges in and actually put infrastructure in, like sewers and water mains and parks and all that stuff, to justify the charging of those development charges. I think it's, I think Councillor Van Der Rishi, I think that's something that this council should look at, is how can we better position ourselves so that developers are what I call de-risked. They don't have to take on as much risk to make a development. How do we de-risk development so that we're development ready? And that's something I think, Brandon and Z have a big interest in, to making sure that we are, ready for business and being able to essentially to increase our taxes and our development charges. So I think that's something that, in Brandon's plan going forward, that's something you should, reach out to him on and see what other things we could do, what other communities are doing to encourage development.
So just back to Paula then for a moment then. Paula, when you hear that and you realize that you're going to maybe put in some services into that plot of land, but it cannot be considered bonusing because of the fact you're opening it up now to anybody willing to purchase it. Am I correct there in thinking that? Because you're not doing it for any special developer. You're doing it to be able to sell it at the best value we can get. Does that make sense?
It's I don't know. I think it's very fact specific. It's sounding a little dodgy, to be honest.
Okay.
I'll just say that.
Okay. So
Brandon wants to speak to it.
Tread carefully with your advice, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the clear thing is that it's for the benefit of multiple. So if we're doing a business park, industrial park, like the Judd Park, it's for the multiple parcels there. If we're building an expansion to a water treatment plant or something, or we're going to put in like a trunk sewer, it's to benefit more than one parcel. Or if we're going to loop a water main, it's going to benefit multiple developments in the area. So that's and the municipalities do that often.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, moving on back to you, Teresa. I don't see any other hands up.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. So we're going to move into the operations division, and Bill Cridman is going to give us a brief overview of that department structure. Bill, I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. And yeah, I'm excited here today to introduce the new operations division to council members. The ops division is a newly created concept with Norfolk County. It used to basically, a lot of municipalities do have an operational division. The best way I can describe it to councilors to keep in mind, we're the work boots, X11 hard hat, t-shirt, carry your lunch pail in the truck kind of group. So with that, we are a combination of community emergency services being the park side and public works being the roads, facilities, and fleet. So with that, next slide. Yeah, I guess maybe I should have started here, but anyways, we consist of the 5 departments, which are fleet and facilities. And as I go through my presentation, fleet and facilities are basically an internal group. We do all of the fleet and facilities for the Norfolk County staff users, whereas parks, marinas, and roads are more for the public. As our customer service. Next, please. And with this, I'll just do a quick breakdown of each new division. And I've just put some highlights here, and I've kind of maybe a little different some of the others. I've just added some challenges. So basically, winter control operation or roads operations. A quick overview is obviously winter control is our big one. We have approximately 65 staff in the roads department. And maybe that seems like a handful or a lot of staff, but when you look at 2,100 kilometers of center line, I mean, if you stretch that out, we maintain the same amount of roads, I believe, if you were to drive from here to Ottawa. Also, if I stay on winter control, we have to hire a handful, 4 or 5 extra truck drivers because we don't have enough to go around to cover all routes. Plus, we do contract out 20 contract routes to local contractors. And again, that puts us up to probably about when we get a snowstorm, at midnight, there's 65 units approximately that need to hit the road the next morning. Roadside vegetation control, we cut the grass and roads the twice a year, the roadsides, plus the brush chopper are involved with tree planting and that sort of thing. Street lighting is another task that we look after. Obviously, roadside signage. There's no road in Ontario where you drive where there's not signage. We deal that. Street sweeping, patching, bridge and culvert maintenance, and obviously all the municipal parking lots. And I probably haven't captured everything that the roads groups do there. I could also touch base on every special event that comes through. Roads are involved with road closures and setups and things like that. I think some of our major challenges for council to be aware of are meeting provincial maintenance standards. And these have been out for a number of years, so they're not new. However, liabilities are a big thing in our roadways. And years ago, we could probably I wouldn't say get away, but we weren't necessarily included in every lawsuit from a fender bender or severe accident, and now we are. So there is a lot of documentation that our drivers and employees need to document their daily routines, when they're on roads, what they see, what they did, application of the trucks, because as soon as there is something that happens, we are called in, and it's the large net they throw out for all liability, and the municipality is always involved in that. Next, I think, is the public expectation, and whoops, not next slide. So, okay, public expectation, I think, is probably a big thing for everybody, in municipalities now. The public is more educated. Council meetings are online. They can Google things. They also compare us to other municipalities. So I think as far as customer service, roads have really had to pick their game up in the past because the public just expects more out of us than in the past. And obviously, aging infrastructure is an issue. I think council is aware that the road reserve is one of our non-healthiest reserves, and we do have a large number of culverts that have been in the ground probably 50 or 60 years, need to be replaced. Our street lighting, even though we have recently updated the heads to LEDs, there's still poles in the wirings, and I could go on. It's just aging infrastructure. So that's it for roads. We can go next slide. Marinas are an interesting one. Norfolk County operates and maintains 2 county-owned marinas, one in Port Dover and one in Port Rowan. The one in Port Rowan, a few years ago, we changed it to a non-staff marina. With that said, it's still issues where marina staff in Port Dover do have to go down. It is by a quieter marina. It also has our boathouses. We have about 38 boathouse leases and about 40 slips there. We have to ensure that there's a safe environment for all users and staff in these marinas. And we also have to ensure quite a high level of customer service, in my opinion, because we are compared to every marina in Ontario, private. There are a few other municipally owned ones, but the boaters and the users of the marinas are they're very important that they get a high level of service. So challenge with that is basically trying to ensure a high level of service to the user satisfaction cost. Staffing seems to be a ongoing challenge in marinas, and I think a lot of it's due to the nature of the job being seasonal in the summertime, longer hours, and it is predominantly a student. We have one full-time, our manager, and a number of students, and then a few part-time positions. And again, the part-time positions seem to be tough to hold just for the fact that it isn't full-time job. It isn't a full-time job from year to year. It's seasonal, so we tend to be challenged with staffing there. And also the whole user fees, because obviously a marina like Port Dover does make money. It's set by user fees. It makes money, pays for itself, I'll say, plus there is some money left over, and that money goes to upgrades to that marina. And at times we seem to be challenged by the users because we are compared to private and privately owned marinas. And then at times they'll say, well, it's Norfolk County, you have big pockets, why can't we have more of the marinas? And we have to just instill in them that they pay for the use of the marinas. However, the marina shouldn't cost or cost other people, such as myself, who do not own a boat or use a marina. It shouldn't be on my tax bill to help that. So the marinas have to be 100% self-sufficient. Next. Parks operations, and before we went to the ops, we had parks would have included our programming, our summer camps, and our aquatics. And now if we're back to the whole work boot X11 t-shirt idea, we just basically do the brick and mortars of those buildings, and Brandon's group and community planning actually do the programming side and registration as such. So with that, parks is a big group. 30 full-time staff, and we bring in approximately 20 students each summer for 4 months, I'm sorry. And students are a big part of our workforce. We couldn't pull off what we do without the summer students. We have 100+ parks, 2 splash pads, 5 arenas, the Simcoe Recreation Center, 2 pools, highly involved in special events, trails, cemeteries, facility maintenance, community halls, and also my slide, I failed to include forestry staff in there as well. So that my apologies to my forestry staff if they're watching. Again, our challenges there are aging infrastructure, a lot of our older halls, and we've chatted, about our pool, our seniors home, our senior center, which we dealt with a few years ago. These buildings are all getting older and need work done to them. Again, public expectations, people can go online, and we're held to, certain level, City of Guelph, City of Brantford, they all do this, why can't we do this? And I think public or budget constraints play a big part in the parks. I mean, as staff, we can always say we don't have enough money, and we realize that, we have to have. However, in parks, it seems lately with we have the aging dynamics. People want different things in parks, and we're always questioning, why don't we have more splash pads? Have a splash pad in say each major urban area, or why don't we expand our trails? And it all does take money. So staff have to do their best to work with what they have and explain to the public that there are limits that we can offer. Next. Fleet. Our overall responsibility is obviously maintain 300 units of fleet equipment, and this includes our ambulances as well as our fire trucks. Fleet also manages the fuel supply for the entire county, and we also manage the radio communication infrastructure. So challenges that we face there, I should say we have 10 staff. and 3 in the office, and 7 mechanics for those 300 pieces of units, as well as we do contract a lot of work out. Obviously, with the 300 units, seven mechanics are just not able to keep up with that amount of work. Aging fleet, obviously, as Norfolk moves forward and trying to keep taxes low, we are stretching the age or the service level of our fleet vehicles out. And at times, when you do stretch that out, it can cost more to maintain them. I threw in staffing retention of mechanics. We seem to, mechanics are in high demand, truck technicians especially. And when we're competing with the private sector, at times the municipality has a tough time with some of the things that private industry can give out. So we are presently 1 mechanic down, interviews happening. We're hoping to get back to full staffing, but that is one thing I want to bring council's attention. Mechanics seem to be tougher to get. And last one is supplying a 24/7 service with a small group. And when I say this, the wintertime road staff are out 24/7 on the roads. Fire and paramedics are obviously a 24/7 service. And when the breakdowns happen, it just becomes difficult with the to have an on-call service that can cover all of these off when they only work a day shift. And again, that's things moving ahead in ops. We are looking at things as a morning shift and an afternoon shift, and for fleet to kind of cover that off. But we've got some work to do on that. Next, please. Facilities. This again is mostly internal. Customer service and overall responsibilities are they maintain all Norfolk County buildings to a certain degree, and I say that some buildings have heating, HVAC in them, others don't, but there are over 140 buildings in Norfolk County's inventory which this group looks after. This group also consists of only 7 employees with we do bring a summer student in, so obviously contract services is a large part of our facilities operation. HVAC units, obviously big for heating and cooling our units. Building security is also something probably within the last decade that's become important. Marlene, who is the director, is in charge of our security cards. So what staff get in what buildings. A staff member leaves, she has to change who can get in. Staff members change work areas. That's a big part of her job as well. Energy audits and upgrades, another probably in the recent decade that's got more important. We've been very successful in getting grant funding from the senior level governments on, we have to do energy audits and then apply for grant money and things. So that's something to keep our older buildings, replacing lights, replacing HVACs to high technology is a big part of it. A building condition assessment. Each building has to be gone over every few years. So I think it's 5. I think it varies from building to building. But anyways, building condition assessments have to be updated. And from that, a lot of our work plans come out when we receive these staff work with consultants on these, and that's how we kind of base our 10-year capital on there. Also, new capital projects are going to be a big thing. Council's probably aware of a lot of the, been very successful with grants lately. There seems to be a lot of money flowing from the provincial and federal government. And, the new capital projects, this group will be taking care of them for our change rooms expansions on our arenas, as well as our conversion of the rec center ice to a senior center. And they have also, in the past when we've built new fire halls and things, this group is involved with that. Challenges is obviously aging infrastructure. Our buildings are not getting any newer, and Norfolk County, over its 21-year history, has not built a lot of new buildings, as many of you will know. And lastly, it's just the pure number of buildings in the inventory. And I mentioned it's close to 150. And just with that sheer volume and the 7 staff members that work here, it does keep that group flowing. And I think with that is my last slide. So I went through that pretty fast. And again, I guess if questions are, I'm open for questions if they're there. And if not, we'll proceed with the next group.
Thanks, Bill, very much. First is Councillor Columbus.
Good presentation, Bill. My question is with respect to road operations. And I noticed driving through the industrial parks, there's a tremendous amount of weed pressure along the roadsides where we have industrial park. And I don't know what the policy is, but I can't see anybody wanting to come here to put an industry in with that kind of a mess that's fronting some of these properties. Is there any chance we can get those cut by the municipality?
Yeah, I guess through Teresa, to the council. Yeah, like I said, roadside vegetation is a road's responsibility, and I agree with you. If we have nice or good, clean looking roadsides, I think it's the first thing that people do see when they come into a community. It sets that first impression. So I will review with staff. Perhaps you're talking more of the Delhi industrial park there, but yeah, there's no reason if it's a municipally owned road, which I believe this is. The ditch lines would be ours to maintain, and maybe I can double back with Brandon's group, and we can work a little closer with them. But no, it's a good point, and those could be cut back if you think that's a hindrance to folks looking to develop there.
That would be great. At least one cut would make a big difference. Thanks.
Councillor Vanden Rishi, go ahead.
Unmute myself there. Thank you. To you, Bill. The road, and I have a concern on the ditch program as well. Do we have a program set up to eliminate invasive species such as Phragmites? It's a big hindrance to a lot of the ditches in the area, sight lines, the whole thing. Do we have a program set up to destroy that?
Yeah, through. I guess I'm speaking through the clerk. Through Teresa to Councillor. Yeah, we started when I was back in roads about 8 years ago. We started the spray program, and I think we've come a long ways. It's now expanded. We do roadsides yearly. Municipal drains are on side now as well, and our storm retention ponds in the urban areas. They're very close to getting clearance to spray over the water on these. And so I think Norfolk's did a good job of cleaning its frag up. I think you still see some in municipal drains and obviously our retention ponds, but as we get better, or as we get more approval for these products, we do spray frag. I actually a number of years ago did a talk in Ontario Good Roads, and we were well ahead of the curve. And that was brought on by a council member who had just traveled Ontario and saw this and how bad it was. And it's kind of spurred on. I know the Nature Conservancy of Canada is actually very involved with frag as well. And I believe now that you actually, if you have it on your farm or in your backyard, they will come in and spray. And I don't think there's any charge because there's a lot of cooperation with the provincial government and money coming in, and we're doing well. That is one of our biggest invasive species. There is the giant hogweed, Japanese knotweed. There's all kinds of things that pop up. So we do spray these in isolated patches, but frag is our big one now. So I'm hoping in the next couple of years, frag becomes a distant memory here in Norfolk County, but it is persistent. It is right now yearly. We have to keep up on it.
Another question is pertaining to the ditches and, say, for instance, a drain. I had a question posed to me the other day, and I couldn't answer it. The county in this department has its own equipment, and I just wanted assurance that you have a backhoe. Is that true, or is it not true?
Yeah. Yes, we do. As far as brush choppers, we presently have two brush choppers. We have a third one that is up for tender shortly, and we have the 4 operations yards: Highway or County Road 45, which is the West Delhi, one in Simcoe, one in Villanova, and each have a small backhoe. We do not own a large excavator. These are small machines, and it is something that I do agree. We, with all of the roadsides, the 4,200 kilometers. Most of them have a ditch. That's a lot of work, and there probably are ditches that do need maintenance. It's an ongoing thing. But for the answer, we do have backhoes on the staff.
Okay, that'll make my concerned citizen a lot happier. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Chop. Thanks, Bill, for the presentation. My first I actually did want to talk comment on frags and stormwater retention ponds as well. So I believe last year at the budget we did put some funding away, even if it's not specific to frag removal, but it was for cleaning up of the stormwater retention ponds. Is there a plan put together for some of that funding? Is it just kind of on an as-needed basis, or have you had time yet in this new role to kind of develop that?
To Councillor Martin, still putting the plan together, but one of the big benefits with ops and having, let's say, with retention ponds, it's a really good example. We said in the past that the parks folks would cut to the upper bank. So they cut the grass around, they maintain the trail or the access road, which we call it. And then roads would be responsible for cleaning the inlets and the outlets and any trees that were in there. Now that we're all together, we have had a meeting, it was at Pheasant Trail, actually, if you're familiar with that, you would be, Councillor Martin, off of number 6. And we're going to, now that we're together, it doesn't have to be the siloed approach, we're all together. So I think folks with retention ponds are going to see a better level of service, because I think we're going to be able to come in and do more cleanups. It's not going to be without roads out there, people looking at one-stop shopping. And if we can get the ability to spray the frag, I think that's going to clean up probably a quarter of these. And then, not to really confuse council, but our engineering group, which is an EIS group adjacent, they do the complete clean out, and they have been out doing inventories on these ponds. So when a pond is new, there is no sediment in it. And then over the years, as the catch basins, and they do their job, they collect sediments and debris, they have to be cleaned out, and that is done by engineering services. So there still is some confusion, but again, that would be a administrative contract to somebody with large backhoes and to haul it out. So my word is yes. I would hope with the ability to spray frag and putting the ops group together, I'm hoping we get less calls in the future on our storm retention ponds.
Okay, thanks, Bill. My next question was going to be just some clarification, I guess. The 100 plus parks that you oversee, that's including wood lots, that's including community parks, that's including open grass spaces. Is that?
That's correct. A lot of our parks are very passive. There's no equipment in some of them, but if you drive through the county, I think it's just a rollover from the previous municipality. Parks were put in and put together. It's a lot of grass to cut, and a lot of these are passive parks.
Perfect, which leads me to my last question. At budget, we did some overhauling with FTEs. We've got 100 plus parks. I know it's probably too early for you to comment on any efficiencies per se, but how are we doing overall with the management? It's kind of a new operations department. How's that going?
I think definitely there are some hiccups, but I think you look at the amount of rain we've had this year, and with rain, grass grows, and I don't think I've got the volume of calls on uncut grass in parks and cemeteries, and I'm not sure if some councillors want to challenge me on it. Maybe they've went to them. So I think it's working out fairly well. We've also had toot our own horn here. We've had great worked with our roads group is our biggest group, but they've came over. We've had road staff go to the cemeteries at the start of the year to help clean up, and that's again the whole idea of the ops group is you've got a larger workforce, throw one or two into a smaller workforce to get them caught up. They're not as stressed, and the end result is a better product, I think, for the customers. So I think so far so good, but I'm definitely always interested in feedback from any councillors if you hear things. But I'm just hanging my hat on the amount of rain we've had in grass. It's been a fairly quiet year in grass calls, and that's something that usually triggers the general public.
Okay, thanks, Bill. That's all.
Councillor Van Passen, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to go back to the stormwater retention ponds, have you made any headway on your research of since a stormwater retention pond is for drainage specific to a defined area, such as this, the specific subdivision, that the maintenance on that be billed back as a local improvement, just like a municipal drain, that it's only the people that it benefits pay for the improvements or the maintenance on it. And have they done some more research on that?
To the councillor, we have chatted. I'm not sure if Jason Godby or Burgess, somebody a little more involved, may want to speak, but I do know some municipalities are putting in a stormwater bylaw or surcharge, and that's exactly that. Instead of having water go down the municipal catch basin, municipal pipe to a municipal drain and out from a subdivision, a lot of municipalities are looking at bringing that in. That's exactly what it is for people to pay for their stormwater. So I think in Norfolk, there's been talks, Councillor Van Passen, but we haven't got any concrete plans to move ahead with that yet that I know of.
I see that there's Jason Godby. I see you have your hand up, but we a nudge from the clerk that we need to keep moving. So perhaps we could take this conversation up another time, and we can get on with the next presentation. Councillor Van Passen, if you had further questions there, you can put them in writing to the clerk, and she'll get them out to council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I'm going to turn it over to Jason Godby and his team for our final two presentations regarding drainage matters and waste management. So Jason, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's a great segue into from Councillor Van Passen's previous question. I'll just quickly state that staff in all three of these areas, operations, environmental and infrastructure services, and community development, have started to form a little bit of a task force to look at those types of issues relating to stormwater management. So we are slowly moving on it. We understand your interest and desire on that, and we'll get you some more info on it. So with that, the Environmental and Infrastructure Services Division is comprised of three departments, being Environmental Services, Engineering, and Asset Management. Our Environmental Services group is basically comprised of water treatment and distribution, wastewater collection and treatment, and our waste management activities. Our engineering group is primarily responsible for our capital reconstruction programs, so our urban and rural roads, bridges, water and wastewater infrastructure. And when we talk about wastewater infrastructure, that is actually building on, it is including both stormwater and sanitary sewage. So it's kind of, we look after the urban storm drainage as well, like the construction of, and that's where we get the tie with the ops group and Bill's team with the maintenance of these assets and our combined efforts on retention ponds going forward. Our development engineering group is tied very heavily to our community development team and the planning group there to look at all the new subdivisions, condos, and site plans that are coming in. Our municipal drainage services team, there's a specific presentation coming right on the heels of that, so I'm not even going to really talk about them at this moment. And then our asset management group, which we've been working on the development and maintenance of our asset management plan and programs going forward. I didn't prepare a whole lot so far as the overall of our department. I think you guys have all heard enough out of me over the last number of months and years about some of our infrastructure challenges. So with that, there were two main areas that we wanted to highlight today, that being our drainage services and some waste management. So to start, I've got our one senior drainage superintendent, Mr. Bill Mays, with us today here this morning to run through a higher level presentation specific to drainage services and how they fit into our municipal operations. So with that, I guess we can go to the next slide. And I believe that Mr. Mays should be online, and he's going to kind of take it from here.
Yes, I'm here, Jason. So I've prepared a pretty lengthy slideshow presentation. We're told we have 20 minutes. I'll try and cram it down to about 5. We'll see what we can do here to help you out. Starting at the very high level, this slideshow is based on a Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs presentation that they've used quite often. We've added slides to accommodate Norfolk County and how they tie in. Very high level overview. We're going to talk about the drainage law in general, different types of drains, and then about the Norfolk County systems. Next slide. So there's many drainage issues. Primarily the water from one property is dumping onto another property. People dealing with natural water courses and ditches, or people dumping into ditches. The problem in all over the world, North America, is who is responsible for resolving the drainage issues? Is it the municipality, the CA, Conservation Authority? And quite often it can be a blend of all of the above, or it can be individuals. Next slide. The types of law. There's the common law decided by courts and the statute law. The Drainage Act was brought in. First drainage laws started in 1835, which is 186 years ago. Up to today, the current Drainage Act had its main changes in 1975, and the latest changes were enacted in June 30th of this year. There was a new regulation brought in to bring in a streamlined process for minor changes to drains. Hopefully that'll solve some of our process issues too. So, next slide. Common law is established. There's two different sets of rules. One based on natural water courses, and a second based on surface water. Natural water course is a defined channel. Usually we'd refer to them as a stream or a creek. And then the surface water is just not collected water. It's runoff coming over top of one property, has really no definition of, it's not in a channel, it's not collected. The best example I could find is right there on the bottom, is that it's water that's not contained in any channels or pipes. Next slide. Natural water courses, anybody, riparian owners, so the owners that are beside a creek or a water course, the right to drainage and the right to use the water. They have to accept the channel coming through them. They can't block it, create a dam or anything that affect the upstream or downstream lands. Next slide. So surface water is one of the main calls us as superintendents get called out on, is the surface water from one farm flowing across the farm and dumping onto a neighbor's farm. Can be contentious among landowners. Courts have said that the lower owner doesn't necessarily have to accept the water. They can protect their property by using dams or dikes or berms. But there is some court cases where you can't block the water purposely to tick off your neighbor. When it comes to lawsuits, there's not a lot of rules on surface water. As soon as you collect it, as you see in the image on the bottom right there, collecting it in a culvert or a pipe, really common call we get is on eaves troughs and sump pump discharge. As soon as it's collected and dumps onto a neighbor, you can be held liable for damages. Primarily, that's through civil courts. Next. Again, put in my disclaimer. Don't make a lot of changes without talking to a proper consultant. Next slide. In Norfolk County or any municipality in Ontario, there's a distinction between a roadside ditch, which is under the levy-funded road maintenance. There's storm sewers and storm ponds, which again, they're under the Municipal Act and levy-funded. And then there's municipal drains under the Drainage Act, which are a combination of levy-funded and the ratepayer-funded. We do have combinations where the storm drains or road ditches use the municipal drains as outlets. And one or two cases, they're not ideal, but where municipal drains do outlet into roadside storm sewers or storm ponds. Next slide. Overriding common law. You have two methods under the existing Drainage Act. One is a mutual agreement drain and one is a petition drain. As soon as a drain is constructed, the common law responsibilities are semi-removed from the owner. They still have certain rights, but the maintenance and repair becomes the responsibility of the municipality. Next slide. Mutual agreement drains, different levels. Obviously a verbal agreement, handshake agreement, farmers do it quite often out in the field. They're the most cost effective. If the owners can come to an agreement on what to do. That's probably the quickest and easiest. One of the first things Chris and I usually recommend to an owner that's experiencing problems is talk to your neighbor. If you can come up with an agreement, great. If it's affecting a couple properties, you can register an easement agreement on title. Under the Drainage Act Section 2, there's a short section of the Drainage Act that talks about mutual agreement drains. There's a mutual agreement form. Landowners agree to who pays for construction, who pays for maintenance, and who pays for improvements in the future. As in the bottom there, as you can tell, if everybody in the agreement doesn't agree, the agreement doesn't happen. Next slide. Petition drains is primarily what Chris and I look after, is all the existing drains and the drain construction program that we have in Norfolk. The Drainage Act has a couple of regulations, including regulated forms, and what it's basically, we refer to it as a process for creating a communal drainage system. There's a couple different petition forms, one for the individual owners to petition, or there's a separate form for where the road authority can petition. So if a road ditch or a storm sewer needed an outlet, and I would recommend if it went over multiple properties, the Drainage Act may be a solution. Otherwise, the municipality can always get an easement, so it turns into a balancing act of what is the better solution. As soon as an owner signs a petition, there's a disclaimer right on the petition form that the owner becomes financially responsible. If the owner decides not to go ahead with the work to date, the owners become responsible for the cost of all the engineering and administration up to that point. We do have a lot of issues where owners do not disclose that they sell the property and they may be assigned petition. We're rebuilding our GIS to have it online that would disclose to the owners a little bit better. We do have some information already online, and owners are encouraged to contact us at the time of sale, or real estate and lawyers do. Next. Council consideration of the petition. The petition is filed with the clerk of the municipality and must be considered by council. Council has basically two options. They either accept the petition or reject the petition. If the petition is rejected, the owners can appeal to the tribunal. Most of the cases I've reviewed, the tribunal orders the municipality to accept the petition, unless, of course, it's draining a wetland or has environmental impacts. And then in those cases, it's something more of an environmental feature, and not the Drainage Act use is not encouraged in those cases. Council doesn't determine if the petition is valid or not. That is the council's job, is to accept the petition or reject it. And then if they accept the petition, then they must appoint an engineer. The engineer's first job is to hold an on-site meeting, determine the area that needs drainage, like the flooding zone. And from that, the Drainage Act says what is a valid petition or not. So the engineer determines. Upon receipt of the petition, the staff have to circulate the petition to the environmental agencies before appointing an engineer. That's an automatic process under the Drainage Act. Owners can, environmental agencies can ask for an environmental appraisal, and the minister or the owners can ask for a benefit cost statement. The catch of those two is under the Drainage Act, whoever asks for those environmental reviews pays the cost of the environmental review up front. Now, agencies also pull a quick one on you and don't request one up front, but they term it differently through the process. So you still have to get into the environmental permits and approvals later anyway. Next page. The appointment of the engineer. The Drainage Act is very specific. Council must appoint the engineer by a bylaw or resolution. The engineer must be fair and impartial to any party between the municipality or the owners affected by the project. And that also includes utilities. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen throughout. The engineers work with the superintendents in the county as well as our drainage clerk to coordinate meeting notices and communication with the landowners. We try and stay quite available to the public for discussions throughout the whole process. Again, at the bottom, the engineer has to determine whether the petition is valid or not. The engineer could go out in the field and decide that the petition is not valid. That stops the project right at the start. Should be about a less than $1,000 invoice from the engineer, and the project stops at that stage. If the petition is valid, the engineer is responsible under the Drainage Act to prepare a drainage report. Next. These are some stats from the OMAFRA. They publish them annually, but obviously due to COVID, they haven't released anything new in the last couple of years. Number of projects across the province based on total cost of the project. There's 20 to 25 active engineers in the province working under the Drainage Act. There's actually a land drainage committee that many of those engineers are part of that meet annually. And this chart is really saying depending on the value of the project, how long on average a project will take in years. So as you can see, a project that's exceeding $400,000 across the province is taking over 4.5 years. We're seeing in Norfolk County, we're slightly higher numbers than that based on the current active projects that we have. Next page. Drainage Act's very clear. The engineer must be impartial. Or an individual landowner can't sway the engineer's decision. Obviously, he should take comments and any information into consideration in the reports, but he has to be fair to everybody. Quite often, the engineers talk about a fairness test. It's very hard to define, and each person will have a different opinion of what is fair. So that's the problem with doing work under the Drainage Act, is they have to balance everybody's needs at the same time watching for costs. And it's when any owner that's assessed a penny or so can appeal every part of the report, that can get contentious. The engineer's design must be cost effective. It must be able to, the municipality must be able to build the drainage system, including permits and approvals. And we in Norfolk include at least 1 or 2 additional meetings over top of what the Drainage Act requires, just in an attempt to get owners' input and communication plans open and clear. Next page. The Drainage Act says all these things the engineer must do. Skip, next page. One of the things, the engineer must prepare a plan. Council will see the plans as an attachment to the reports. The plans will show the dark gray line in here is a watershed boundary. Any rain water, surface water, groundwater within that area uses the drainage system. That also connects to who pays for the drainage system. It shows the drain, any features, any benchmarks, the ownerships of the lands, which also ties to the schedules and assessments in the reports. Next page. Drainage Act has general guidelines for the engineers to follow in terms of assessing properties. The first 2 are benefit and outlet. Benefit is a direct benefit to the property, improved use of the land, improved structures, stabilizing, getting an outlet for the property. The engineer has to establish a dollar amount to apply to that property due to the requirement for the drain. The outlet or engineering liability assessments, that is based on the area of land and rate of flow. Best example is that farmland has a generic factor, call it a factor of 1 for runoff. Forest, more water seeps into the ground, so they would treat that about 50% of the water runs off the bush lot. Roads, some engineers use from 2 to 4 times the amount of runoff from a farm that comes off of a road or a paved surface. The next assessment is a special benefit. If something special is done on a drainage system, a landowner can ask for a special type of pipe or a special pavement or driveway that owner that requests the increased level of pays for that increased change in the design. Special assessment under section 26. It's very clear that the road authority and utilities, if changes are required to the design or location of the drain because of the road or public utility, the road authority or the utility pays that increase in cost. The example would be a pipe crossing a road. Every owner is entitled to a pipe or a crossing, but the people in the watershed shouldn't have to pay for the extra gravel and length of pipe and asphalt that are required because of the road. Next. Here's a sample of an assessment schedule. Nicely, OMAFRA used a project in Norfolk County that was constructed in 2011. The engineer must split out every property, the area affected. It may not be the entire property is within the watershed, so that will be only the portion of the property that's in the watershed. The engineer splits out the benefit outlet special assessments. Farmlands are entitled to a 1/3 grant from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs under the ADIP grant program. And then allowances, if there's a list of about 6 or 7 allowances under the Drainage Act. Property owners are paid for damages to crops or damages to property, for establishing an easement through their property somewhat. And then the owners come up with, or the engineer comes up with a net assessment to each property. The total project costs must equal the total in this assessment schedule. And that's how that's the proportion that the final works is built out on. Next page. Grants. Again, the Drainage Act provides that grants may be applied. In 2006, OMAFRA pulled the grant program. They hit quite a bit of resistance, so they brought it back real quick, but they also brought it back with additional rules under the ADIP, Agricultural Drainage Infrastructure Program. So they have policies and procedure and what will be eligible for grant and what will not be eligible for grant. That is equal to 33% of any maintenance or construction assessments to agricultural lands on maintenance, repair, and construction jobs. MAFRA also pays for 50% of my wages and Chris Dunn's wages when we're performing duties under the Act. They have a list of applicable duties. And then they also give a 18% for our salary and supplies and equipment, such as trucks or tools that we need for doing our drainage operations. It's the municipality's responsibility to prepare and submit the grant applications to the ministry each year in January, February, March, and then subject to their review and comments. There was a couple of years we fell behind. MAFRA fell behind on their budget, and I think they're still trying to pick up pieces on that. So there may be a couple of projects that are pending receipt of grant. It's not 100% guaranteed, but it's pretty close to. What they do is they put our projects in a queue, and as their budget becomes available, then they will release the funding. One of the main rules is if we don't have a permit or approval, then they will not pay grant. So we additional reporting that we have to do annually on every project. Next slide. Final report. We have 2 council reports coming tonight, where the engineer's final report is being presented to council for consideration. The engineer typically presents their report, and then all owners that are affected, if an owner is paid a penny, assessed a penny in the report, they must be notified of the council meeting, and owners that are along a drainage system have the opportunity to add or remove their names from the petition to determine whether the project goes forward. So at the council meeting, the owners have the right to add or withdraw their names. Council can ask questions of the engineer or any owners available to make the appropriate decision whether to accept the report and carry forward with the Drainage Act process or defer and make changes. Next page. So again, at the council meeting, council basically has two options. Well, they have three options. I don't recommend the third one, but they can accept the report, adopt, giving us first and second reading of the bylaw. The third reading comes later after the Drainage Act appeals. The council can refer the report back to the engineer to make changes. Again, that's additional engineering and time. So hopefully the first submittal is as accurate as possible, but it does occasionally happen. Any decision of council, whether council accepts the report or refers the report back, the owners may appeal to the drainage tribunal. Pretty rare if things are going smoothly, but it can happen. Council can't make changes to the report. They can't direct the engineer. Again, the engineer must be impartial and has to be his report. And the council can't necessarily address assessments. That's an appeal to the quarter revision that the owners are emailed later. The main impact council has is if council is changing something regarding the design or location of the drain, that will change costs and assessments. So it's indirect connection. But if an individual owner is arguing at council about what they're assessed in the report, that is a separate appeal because the county's assessed similar to any owner in the report. So county can't change one person's assessment without affecting everybody. Next slide. Again, appeals. The quarter revision isn't automatic. Happens within 20 to 30 days after council. Again, all owners are notified and provided with the date of the quarter revision. Norfolk County has a committee, not council members. It's actually the Committee of Adjustment that it's a party of three that holds the appeals. The engineer has their opinion. The owners may have their opinion. Both parties plead their case, and the quarter revision can make adjustments. They can't make changes to the total cost. They can take a dollar amount off one party and add it to another party or to the project in general. So it's kind of a generic local appeal. Beyond that, any owner can appeal to the drainage tribunal if they don't agree with the court decision of the quarter revision, or if they don't agree with the report or technical details in the report. And then beyond that, again, there's the drainage referee, which is legal or procedural appeals. Usually it's a staged appeal process as you go through. We're lucky to try and avoid, pretty rarely do we end up at the referee. Next. Final authorization. After the appeals, council gives the third reading of the bylaw, and that third reading enacts the drainage report. Council and or staff can start with tendering construction, and at that stage we can assess the cost to the owners. Without the bylaw, you can't do that work. The county becomes responsible for the drain after the completion certificate. So the engineer must sign off that the construction was done according to his report, his or her report, and then the drain becomes Norfolk's infrastructure, where we're responsible for maintaining the drainage systems in perpetuity until the drain report is changed or abandoned. Next slide. So drains are a community project through a public process. They have a legal existence because each drain has a bylaw. Norfolk, we have 1,975 different bylaws relating to drains. And Norfolk County is responsible for maintenance. Next. Next is the changes to the Drainage Act, improvements, any alteration, relocation, everything must be done through a report. Adding features to a drain must be done through a report. Engineers' reports, depending on the scale of the change, can get sometimes the engineering outweighs the improvements. Next. Managing municipal drains. There's a bunch of factors under the Drainage Act. We're responsible for maintenance and repair. There's section of the Act to deal with improvements. There's sections of the Act to deal with assessment schedule changes, changes in ownership. There's a section of the Act that deals with owners connecting to the drain or disconnecting from the drain, and how to enforce those provisions. Next. Drainage Act responsibilities. The Drainage Act directs everything to the council of the municipality. The municipality may appoint a drainage bylaw or a drainage superintendent under bylaw to deal with those responsibilities, primarily related to the maintenance end of things. But in Norfolk, we also look after and facilitate the construction process as a, and then also Norfolk County has a delegated drainage clerk to help our clerk Teresa with a lot of the notifications and process along that line. And then all the financial end of things are directed under the Drainage Act to the treasurer, including grant and levying assessments to the owners. Next. Drainage superintendent, Norfolk County, we have 2 appointed under bylaw. We also have the staff connected in with it. Again, we've already mentioned that the part of our wages are subsidized by grant, so we can remain impartial when we're talking with owners and through the maintenance or construction processes. Next page. Maintenance and repair. The Drainage Act says we must maintain a drain. If an owner identifies a problem or we're out there inspecting and we find a problem, Norfolk County or the superintendents must take action. And if Norfolk doesn't take action, the county or the superintendents can be held liable for damages to lands, crops, properties. The superintendents have and contractors have the right to access the drains using the corridors. Those are not open to the public. Quite often we want people to use them as quad trails, biking trails, dirt bike trails, you name it. We're not granting access to any other public, although it does happen quite often. And from time to time, owners will install gates and fences to stop people from cutting through on our corridors that we have to work in and around. So, next. Managing drains. Again, there's different sections of the act that we need to look after. Any property severances, boundary adjustments. If a drain report is severely out of date, we have to hire an engineer to do minor reports on those changes to make it fair for everybody going forward for maintenance. If a landowner connects or disconnects their land from a drainage system, that should change who pays for it. So there's sections of the act that we can make some minor changes, usually affecting one property, and they're relatively quick and straightforward that we can do in-house, or not in-house with an engineer, but at a much cheaper rate than redoing an entire engineer's report. There are a couple of enforcement actions. If somebody damages a drain and we catch them, we can charge the owner directly for the cost of damages and repairs. It is very difficult to enforce. Go figure, you have to catch them in the act and have 110% of the details connected to it. And drains can be abandoned. Occasionally we do have an owner of the drain that doesn't want the drain on their property anymore. It may be more feasible to abandon the drain and let them deal with it themselves than Norfolk continuing maintenance and repairs on the drain where somebody does not want the drain. Next. Who pays? All costs related to drains, maintenance, construction, repairs is assessed to the owners affected according to the bylaws. The owners also include utilities and road authorities, such as Norfolk County. Again, farmlands are eligible for grant, and Norfolk County has some policies in place for collection of cost. And if an owner refuses to pay, the Drainage Act allows the cost to be applied directly to the taxes of that property. Next. Drain program. We have 2 field staff, actually 2.5 field staff. They're out in the field looking after maintenance, repair, inspections, improvements on drains year round, and coordinating contractors to do the repairs. We have, as it says there, we have 650 kilometers of open ditch that we try and clean about 100 kilometers a year. We do fall behind based on permits and approvals, but when I did an analysis of some of the pre-2005 maintenance costs before our scheduled program, and we were at $20 a meter. Even to date, in 2021, our actual costs were coming in at less than $4 a meter countywide, and that's after 20 years of, or 15 years of maintenance on the drains. With the preventative maintenance program, we're doing a lot less logging, tree removal, and we're not digging as much out of the bottom of the channels, which saves costs in the long run over those years. Tile drains are a little harder to inspect and maintain. The problem is that with any infrastructure, it's getting older. A lot of our tile drains were installed in the 60s and 70s and before, and their quality is deteriorating. So we're doing our best to maintain and keep those up to date as calls come in. Next. Permits and approvals. There was a major change in our permitting and approvals in 2017. We used to go direct to the Conservation Authority for the majority of the permits. Now we must go to the Conservation Authority, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and MECP for permits and approvals on any drain. Anytime you're touching a watercourse, we need to check on those. So that's delayed our permits and approvals and set our program back a little bit. Next. Here's our drainage team. We have 2 superintendents, a drainage clerk, 1.5 drainage operators, which is shared with snow plowing in the winter. Our drain program coordinator, Morgan Van Lagen, for doing permits and approvals, and GS and a student each year. Next. Our drainage stats, we have 968 kilometers. In reference to Bill Cridland's presentation, we have 220 of roads. We have nearly 1,000 kilometers of drain with only our 6 staff in there. Maintenance and operation programs are outlined there. You can read that later. Keep going. Next slide. Other services we provide. We work directly with a lot of environmental groups because drains are environmental features. We do have, it's kind of one of the, it's been highlighted across the province, is our wetland drain restoration project, where historically drains have drained wetlands, and the landlord still can't use the land. Why not try and restore them and create a reconstructed wetland, or even just to recharge groundwater and retain water for drought years. A spin-off of that project is Riparian Buffers, planting vegetation and trees. It reduces our maintenance on drains, but it also has all kinds of environmental features. And alternate maintenance program. Some drains are actually trout streams or rivers. And environmental agencies don't want us dredging through the center of a trout stream. So we put different features in the stream to reduce our maintenance while keeping the flow of water going. We do frag control on drains. Morgan runs around a lot and works with NCC and our road staff and park staff to identify sites and have the sites treated. Stream classifications. If we classify a stream, that helps with speeding up our permits and approvals, and we've gotten a lot. Most of those additional programs we do, they come at no cost to Norfolk County or they're the owners on the drains. We get it through grants and third-party funding. At the bottom there, Morgan's getting pretty good at, or continues to be pretty good at collecting money for covering extra features on drains. Next. In summary, there's our summary. I'll let you read that. Next. Oh, and that's the end of our slideshow. Any questions?
Questions from councilors? All right, I think we're getting short on time, so if there are questions, we'll get you guys to compile them, and again, you can send them off to the clerk. And then I think final presentation is on waste management.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, we have our waste management supervisor, Marissa Bakla, online, along with Larry Conrad, our Director of Environmental Services. I believe the two of them will walk quickly through this waste management, some of the changes and challenges that are going to be coming forward. This is meant to be kind of an introduction to some of the big issues that are going to be coming forward that we'll be seeking some council decision and direction on in the future. So with that, I'll let Marissa go on there. Oh, and sorry, thanks, Bill.
No problem.
All right, thanks, Jason. As Jason had mentioned, we're here to talk about waste management, and it's an important service that we provide across Norfolk County to the touches every single resident at least once a week. So it's something that people are very passionate about. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview, we're going to cover our current programs and then also some of the changes that we expect in the future in the next 2 years, as we have numerous contracts expiring and some changes with provincial legislation coming down the pipe. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows where our current operations and contracts are, which is the top line, and then the bottom of the slide with the 2024 to 2030 indicates the timelines for when contracts are expiring, so when we'll need to have new contracts in place, and we'll go through some of the decisions and feedback that we'll be looking for in the future on some of these contracts. Next slide, please. So currently, curbside waste collection is provided by Norfolk Disposal Services, and they have the contract from 2017 to 2024. And they're responsible for collecting weekly curbside garbage and recycling, and then urban leaf and yard waste, which is 16 weeks of the year. And they're also responsible for the bulky item collection. So there's a table there that outlines the tonnage that we've collected in 2020 from the different streams, the cost per ton, and then the total cost for the program. The only thing that's not included is the bulky item on this slide, and it happened in 2020, and we collected about 1,200 tons for a cost of $326,000. And this year we've gone to an appointment-based system where residents call in and pay a fee of $25. And that's starting next week with the first collection. And as of this morning, we have 60 appointments booked. So the uptake on that new program has been positive thus far. Next slide, please. The next contract is the waste transfer halogen disposal. So this is for garbage only, this piece of the contract, and it's through Walker's Environmental Group and subcontracted to Norfolk Disposal. So the curbside garbage collected as well as the transfer station garbage goes to Norfolk Disposal's facility in Waterford, where it's loaded onto 52-foot trailers and taken to Walker's landfill in Thorold. So that contract is a 10-year contract until 2025, and then there's an additional 5-year extension to 2030 if we desire. And then just some numbers is the overall cost from 2020, and then the cost per ton for hauling and disposing of that garbage. Next slide, please. Next is our county transfer stations. So Norfolk County operates and owns 2 transfer stations. One's located in Simcoe and the other's in South Waltham. I've listed the hours there for you. And during budgets this year, there were some changes made to South Waltham. So they're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then Saturdays. And then it'll be closed for 4 months during the winter season starting in December. And then we'll find the fees for you for the transfer stations. Next slide, please. So we have 4 county staff that operate the scale house and are responsible for the flow of traffic in and out of the site and taking payment. So we have 1 permanent full-time and 3 permanent part-time employees. And the drop-off area is operated by Walker Environmental and subcontracted to Norfolk Disposal. So they're responsible for a staff member to operate the loader, assist residents, and directing traffic on site. As part of that contract, they're also responsible for providing the loader and the 40-yard bins for residents to throw their material into. And they also are responsible for switching out the bins and taking them to their final destination. So this contract is a 5-year contract, and we're now in the 5-year renewal period, which takes us to 2025. And the table below just outlines the number of users, the cost per user, and the revenue at both sites and a total for you. We also pay a set monthly fee to Walker Environmental, which covers off the loader operator wages, bin rentals, maintenance, and then we pay per lift. So every time the bin's full, we pay to have that switched out. Next slide, please. Next is our material recovery facility, which also short form is called a MRF. So that's where we process our curbside recycling, and it's located in Simcoe, and our current contractor is HGC Management. So the contract goes until 2024 to align with the provincial transition of the Blue Box program to producer responsibility. Right now, the MRF is responsible for sorting and processing our curbside recycling. We have a 2-sort system where residents sort paper and cardboard in one box and containers in another. And then at that facility, it's baled and sent off to market and sold as revenue to help offset our costs from Norfolk County. So again, I just outlined what the processing costs were for 2020 and then the revenue we had received for selling our recyclables. One other note is that Norfolk County owns the facility, but any of the sorting equipment is owned by our contractor. Next slide, please. Leaf and yard waste composting is taken to T. DeVos Trucking just outside of Langton. The nice thing about this contract is our collection trucks are able to go directly to this facility, so we do not incur any costs for hauling of the leaf and yard waste material. The contract aligns with the expiration of the curbside contract in 2024, and I've just provided some numbers for you of what we've collected for leaf and yard waste from curbside and the transfer station, and then the total costs for composting that material and the cost per ton. Next slide, please. Next is our household hazardous waste program. So typically run 4 annual events spread out throughout the county. The past year has been a little bit challenging with COVID. However, we're gearing up for our first event on Saturday in Simcoe, and then we have 3 others set to run in August, September, and October. Our current contractor is TerraPure Environmental, and last week at council, as part of your agenda package, you had there was a report to extend their contract for an additional year. This program is undergoing transition to producer responsibility. So that's supposed to transition October 1st, but we don't really have a lot of the logistics of how that program is going to look. So at least this way, by extending the contract with TerraPure, it ensures that we'll be able to offer this service to residents next year as well. So I gave you numbers from 2019 just because we only ran 2 events last year, and we have an annual budget of around $100,000. So it's about $25,000 per event, but it can fluctuate depending on the volume of material that comes in and the different types of material, as some are more expensive to dispose of than others. Next slide, please. So this is where we're going to get into some of the changes that are coming forward to 2024. So we have many of our contracts we've tried to align with the Blue Box program changes, and they're expiring in 2024. So some of the new contracts that we require, the big one is going to be curbside collection. And some things we'll be discussing in more detail is how we want to collect that material. Do we want to stick with a bagged-based system, or do you want to look at an automated system using carts, for example? How long of a contract do we want for curbside collection? The next contract will be leaf and yard waste processing. That contract will actually need to be put in place before we do the curbside contract. Looking at potentially organics processing if we want to, we'll have to go down the road of a green bin program. And then our transfer halogen disposal. So that contract initially expires in 2025, but we do have the option to extend it to 2030. For recycling, collection, and processing, it'll transition to producer responsibility, as I had mentioned, in September 2024. So those services will be provided by the producers under the extended producer responsibility. So it's something that Norfolk County won't be responsible for anymore after that. And then also how we will pay for the contract. Is it going to be by ton, which we currently are paying for? Do we want to pay per pass by, so per house that they go past, or do we want to look at like a utility bill model similar to something like the City of Toronto, where you pay on a certain size of bin or something like that? And then also looking at financial modeling of the whole system to get a better idea of what some of these options would end up costing. Next slide, please. So some of the considerations for the curbside collection contract, for garbage collection, as I kind of mentioned before, how we're going to collect that material. So do we want to stick with a manual system, which is labor intensive? We could look at going to a bag tag system where it's more of a user pay system, or go to an automated cart based system, which is less labor intensive. Sometimes it's not as expensive for the collection of that material. We also want to revisit the frequency of collection. Do we want to stay with a weekly collection, or do you want to go to a bi-weekly collection, which also might have some cost advantages? And then also looking at the rebalancing of collection routes. So right now, our collection routes are based on the old former townships and not sometimes conducive to being the most efficient for collection. So might look at rebalancing those routes so it's helpful to collect in certain areas on certain days. Do we want to look at reducing bag limits? Currently, there's a limit of 4 bags for a residential unit and 8 bags for a commercial unit. Do we want to look at lowering that bag limit if we decide to stick with a bag-based system? And also street can collection in BIA areas. So this is another one that's a little bit, it depends on the BIA area. So each BIA area is getting a different type of service. Do we want to make it consistent across all BIAs that they get collection once a week, twice a week? And this is for street cans. So some have opted to take care of their own collection through their BIA fees. Others are relying on municipal services. So that's another one that we'll have to iron out and get feedback on prior to the curbside collection. And then lastly, the specialized collection in seasonal areas. So for example, Turkey Point gets an additional collection on Fridays during the summer months. That's an additional fee to their taxes just because of the rental area in Turkey Point. Next slide, please. So the next piece of the curbside collection is leaf and yard waste. So currently we service 10 urban areas for a total of 16 weeks per year. Do we wish to increase the number of urban areas we service? Like we've heard things like Pine Grove, for example, is an area that doesn't receive service that people have asked why not. Or do we want to look at it being countywide, a countywide service? Other considerations would be to increase the frequency of collection. Is the 16 weeks sufficient, or is there demand for additional collection? Or do we want to look at modifying that collection schedule? And the next piece is the organics collection. So currently under the provincial framework for organics, Norfolk County would be required by 2025 to have a green bin program for urban areas only. So looking at that, do we want to those urban areas as required under the provincial framework, or do we want to look at offering it to be a countywide program? And then also some of the challenges would be available capacity. In Ontario, there's been some challenges finding enough processing facilities that have capacity to take this green bin material. But there is the potential to explore with our new wastewater treatment plant contractor, utilizing our wastewater treatment plants for co-digestion of organics and biosolids. And it's currently being explored by other municipalities, so it might be something to consider in this case, that keeping it in-house or keeping it within Norfolk County, which might be also cost-effective. And then the other consideration is where are we going to transfer that material from curbside and take for processing. So those are all other pieces that would fit as part of this puzzle. Next slide, please. The other piece for curbside would be the bulky item collection. So as I mentioned, we've started the appointment-based fee-for-service program. So do we want to continue offering this service, or is there modifications that we would make to this program in the future? And then the last little piece is the extended producer responsibility, transitioning the recycling. So that will happen in September of 2024, and Norfolk County will no longer be responsible for collecting, recycling, or processing. As part of the legislation, the BIAs and commercial businesses are not included as part of that collection. So some of the considerations would have to be, do we wish to provide specialized collection to the BIAs or these commercials areas, or is it going to be up to them to get their own contracts to continue recycling collection? And then municipal building, which include arenas, museums, are also not part of the new extended producer blue box transition as well. Next slide, please. So waste transfer, haulage, and disposal. So we have the option to extend this contract to 2030, but some of the future considerations beyond 2030 is where we transfer the material. As I mentioned, currently it's being transferred in Waterford to go to landfill. What landfill options would we have available in 2030? I think at that point, the Walker's South landfill that we're currently going to is closer, nearing its end of life by 2030. And then do we also want to look at including the transfer of organics with the curbside transfer of garbage? So right now, everything will transfer through Norfolk Disposal until the end of the contract. So whether it's 2025 or 2030, if we wish to use that 5-year extension. Next slide, please. Next is a county transfer station. So after 2025, that contract will expire. So do we wish to continue operating both transfer stations? Revisiting our hours, are they sufficient? Should we be extending them, reducing them? Is there certain days of the week we should be operating? Just kind of reviewing that, as well as should it still a contracted service where we have an operator operating the drop-off area, and then materials that we accept, maybe reviewing what is accepted at transfer stations, if there's other options for additional diversion, and the potential for maybe a mobile HHW trailer rotating sites, or having HHW drop-off rather than event days at our transfer stations. But we would have to amend the ECA, so there would be some money that would need to go towards that. And then as discussed during budgets, there was the potential of closure of South Westingham. And as we found out that the scale is nearing its end of life, so either we decide to continue by replacing that scale, or decisions as to how to proceed with that. Next slide, please. Future considerations for leaf and yard waste. So currently our facility that we take leaf and yard waste to can only accept leaf and yard waste. So the piece of organics, if we go down the road of green bin collection, this facility would not be able to take our green bin material. So do we look at a facility that accepts both of those materials? And this needs to be in place because currently we deliver curbside directly. So when the companies are bidding on that contract, they take that into consideration as to how far their trucks would have to travel to drop that material off. So that would affect the pricing. Next slide, please. For our material recovery facility where we currently process recycling, it's going to become a surplus asset, so to speak, once we no longer have the processing. And so what are we going to use it for? Can we repurpose it to use it as a transfer station for organics or garbage? And do we do organics processing there? I just have one more slide left on hazardous waste, just that the program's transitioning October 1st, and not all hazardous waste is covered under the program. So there's still going to be pieces of material that aren't collected as part of that. And how do we want to move forward? Do we continue with event days? Do we want to look at something more permanent or a mobile unit at a transfer station? So we'll need a new contract for the end of 2022 and beyond. But we don't know exactly how that whole program is going to work at this point. So hopefully, as the year progresses, we'll have more clarity on that. And last slide, please. So recommended next steps to have the third-party financial modeling of the system to give us some idea of what some of the costs for some of the options that we're considering. Reaching out to the residential community to have discussion and feedback as to what they want to see, and engage yourselves in council as we move forward with ideas and discussion as to what you're hearing from your constituents or what you want to see moving forward. So just a quick outline of where we need to be by 2023 to make sure that we're meeting all of our deadlines. So that's pretty much waste management in a nutshell. And thank you for allowing us to present to you today. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thanks, Marissa. I think unfortunately we're going to have to hold questions from councillors, and they will have to send them in again to the clerk. We've run out of time for today. We have an event coming up at noon. So Teresa, anything else for you? Otherwise, I'm going to move for confirming bylaw. Is there anything else?
That's everything, Mayor Chop.
Okay, thanks very much to all staff that has joined us today, and all the presentations were really well done, and hopefully provided some additional background information for councillors. So with that, if I could get a motion to move confirming bylaw 2021.
Mayor Chop, if I can just interrupt, we need a motion to accept the presentations first, please.
Oh, sorry, if I could have a motion then to accept the presentations. Councillor Michelli, seconded by Councillor Columbus. All those in favor? It's carried. And again, motion for the confirming bylaw. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Van den Driesche, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All those in favor? That is carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Columbus, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All those in favor? And that is carried. Meeting is adjourned, and we will see you back at 1 o'clock for the council meeting. Thanks.